how counties will split 370 billion shillings. And that is where I think we should start the conversation from. And we'll start from you, David. Have the media done justice when it comes to holding counties accountable? Have we done enough stories to portray everything that's going in there? This is just one of them. But have we done it justice?
No, I think that is a reportage of the counties is where we have seen a total collapse of journalism.
Total collapse of journalism.
When it comes to counties.
An absolute failure to hold county governments to account by journalists. And everybody is falling over themselves to do some PR for the counties. So the only truth or simplest of a question we hear is when the Auditor General has a question or two. Otherwise, what we're seeing is a regurgitation of someone launched a bridge or the governor has done this. We have nobody questioning. And so when we have the Auditor General's question coming up and millions and millions of money are being questioned how it was spent and decisions made, we have nobody. We cannot trace any point where this story came up. So what we have is, I think, whether for economic or selfish reasons, the reportage in the counties have been turned into PR machines for the completely collapsed.
Why do you think this is the case? I know you've done different training programs across the counties to strengthen journalists, in the counties as well. What sort of feedback do they give you? What do you feel are the issues that they are facing?
And what more do you like to see? Because I not to be the devil's advocate here, yes, but the media have tried to bring out all the issues that come out in the counties. Yeah, if it's good, we say it's good. If it's bad, we say it's bad. What more do you like to see?
Oh, first of all, we have really gone around the counties. Number one is that we have very low investment in counties as media, news media. We haven't invested. We are relying on village camera persons and village MCs to be our guys for broadcast, and a few other guys who have not really gone through the rigor of journalism training. These guys haven't known that the work of journalism is to hold those in power to account. Then we are seeing a total collapse of ethics where most of the guys, correspondents, are on the payrolls of the county people. A weekly M-Pesa message that takes care of people and all that. But then we have, in extreme counties where you have deployed a correspondent, he is only paid per story. We still measure stories by rulers and all that. And sometimes the news is happening 200 kilometers away from where this guy lives. So you rely on the county for transport, then you rely on something for lunch, and rely on them to bring you back. So even if you got taken to launch an imaginary bridge, if you say there was no bridge, then tomorrow you have no transport and all. So it's really total chaos in the counties, and we have really gone from Kilifi to Lodwar to Kitale and wherever.
And the situation is the same.
It's horrible.
Let's get a quick reaction from Tom. Your thoughts?
Yeah, just on that, to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, not a single one of the 47 counties has its own official publication, even like a monthly publication, unless you know otherwise, so that the public would have an idea, at least from the counties, what they are doing, let alone any independent publication, County Watch or something like that. Second, the other thing that comes to mind is that although I'm aware that there are, I don't know, maybe a dozen, maybe a bit fewer, sort of outpost regional stations of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission doing work more or less at the county level. I'm not sure, unless journalists take the trouble to go to their offices, they're going to get the information that is obtained, or whether these just potentially go into files for investigation and possible prosecution. Finally, just again on the journalistic failure, 3 years in a row, we've had from the EACC their national corruption reports. And while giving national figures with samples of around 6,000 that might have some statistical validity, I'm amazed that in all three of those reports from 2015, 16, and 17, they have tables on levels of corruption in 47 counties. But they start by saying that only about 2/3 of their respondents even had any interaction with counties. So that reduces that effective sample to around 4,000. Now, you divide that by 47, and you don't have to be a statistical wizard to know that there is no reliability whatsoever. When you're interviewing like 10 people in Lamu and comparing that with, 46 people in Bomet and so on, and yet the National Bureau of Statistics is cited in the beginning of the reports as having provided some expertise. And just finally, I have made attempts over the last 3 years with the Senate, with the Council of Governors, and especially with EACC, to go there and share my questions about the validity of this data with them, and I just get a brick wall. So the journalists who are covering and writing the stories, and then you see the governors hitting the roof. Maranga saying, how can we be rated the most corrupt when nobody has come here? And then former chair of the council, Salim Mvuri and Kwale, also saying, because the governors don't have any training in analyzing this data either. So even before the journalists, get on the ground to the data, when other people are producing data and it's not sufficiently interrogated, then where is the public left?
Yeah. Sarah, what are your thoughts on this? And that brick wall that Tom is talking about is something I know as journalists we face on the ground a lot. You may not get the information that you're seeking.
We do, but this is information that we knew was coming out. We know now that we are heading towards the budget. We know it's time to talk about county allocations. We have this from last year. We've had it on our table from last year. So the standard would have gone a bit further and not just give us this, because this I can get as a journalist, I can get as a common mwananchi on the internet. By the end of today, it will be out and I'll be knowing this is how much my county is getting. What we would have expected, this is a big story. We are losing a lot of money. So page 2, 3, 4, 5 should have been a breakdown of this is how much Nairobi County got last year. This is what it did with the money according to the governor. But this is what the Auditor General is saying. That way it gives us as readers a chance to now begin interrogating. For us, this is what we learned in journalism school as lazy journalism. You're just giving us what is there. What I would ideally, and now with the internet, this is very easy to get. So they did not move further from reporting or interrogating.
Especially at a time when the Senate and the Council together are arguing for an increase.
And we can assume that time was taken on the little that you say has been done.
Yes.
Why do you think lazy journalism has come into play here? What factors do you think affect the fact that very little has been done in those articles?
Now, well, it's probably lack of planning, one, or maybe they don't even have enough journalists, and this is what we are seeing in most media houses. They've had to cut down on the number of reporters they have in the newsrooms because of money. And so when a story like this comes out, they haven't had time to have arranged on how do we get this online and how do we get it already.
That sort of in-depth coverage that
beforehand, because now with the thin number of reporters on the ground, we're just working a story per day, a story per day, a story per day, just to get the newspaper running, to get the television news on air at 9 o'clock.
John, what are your thoughts on this? You are involved in investigative journalism. These things take time.
Yes,
what you're saying takes time, because then you'd have to break down billions that are allocated to counties and find out whether
one at a time.
And
if he picks only one or two counties, he'll be blamed for being,
then how do you pick which county?
This is the point, and I think Sarah has hit the nail on the head. It's really an issue of planning, right? And the structure of our news has to change. We can't continue to cover news as if people don't get the same news elsewhere, right? That's been my point. We have to start thinking about what else can we do? How can we better contextualize the things that we're getting in the papers or the news that we're getting from different sources in order for them to make sense to people in the counties. So for instance, when Sarah's talking about a breakdown of what we've spent, that's also something that you can get if you go to the Auditor General's office, right? And look at what the historical breakdown is of what exactly has been taking place in the counties. Another thing that for me really stands out about this headline and the reporting about the budget is, how about our debt? Right, so this is what we are supposed to get, right? But what are the counties actually going to get, right? And that's a huge conversation. It's been looming large over the past couple of months. I mean, even last week there was this whole kerfuffle about whether Uhuru's loan request for the second phase of SGR was rejected and on what basis, right? If you were to compare that with what we're actually getting, then that's also a way to be able to go deeper. But to answer the first question that you asked, regarding journalists and David's reaction about whether journalists are lazy, I agree to a large extent. There's a lot of laziness that takes place. There's a lot of lack of training that takes place. But you guys also have to remember that journalists who are on the ground are much closer to power than we are here.
Those
in a sense,
Nairobi,
right?
Quote
and
unquote.
because they're much closer to it, that means they're far more exposed than we are. because Nairobi has a lot more attention paid to it as a capital, or Mombasa or Eldoret, then the journalists there have certain levels of protection.
They almost feel safer.
Exactly.
Than the one in the
but
county.
you go and report about what Kakamega County did, for instance, with its funds, and find that there's been some corruption that's taken place. Certain, what do you call the cabinet secretaries on the ground there?
The CCs.
The CCs,
yeah.
right? A certain CEC has misappropriated funds, and see how quickly and robust the reaction will be. That's also something that we have to consider. That the safety of journalists on the ground there also curtails how they can report.
Yeah.
But that's a huge problem. But I still think that is no excuse as to why they should be able to report properly. I think that's something that we should expect more of ourselves.
Okay. Go ahead, Joe. CEO, I don't know if you wanted to speak further on this, but I want to also direct your attention to the front page of the Daily Nation. Rise and Fall of Kidero is the headline that you find there, with a picture of the former governor of Nairobi. He earned more than 578 million in salaries. This is between 1985 and 2012. Pocketed over 357 million in rental income. Pipeline of overseas stocks, etc. When did the rain start beating the technocrat who became Nairobi governor? But I want to refer you to page, let me see where they actually covered this. Yes, page 4 of the Daily Nation. A question there at a glance. Is he a beleaguered villain or EACC's fall guy? There are those who are asking, in the war on corruption, and with many asking questions about the behavior of county governments from 2013 to date, why has the attention been on this man alone? And some would ask, would the paper have been fair to ask, why him of all the others? What are your thoughts when you look at the coverage of an investigation of a man like him? Of course, the court hasn't charged him as guilty or not, so this is a matter still in court. But your thoughts about the coverage?
Before I do that, I want to close what John spoke about.
Go
the
ahead.
counties and the journalists there. Yes, the journalists are really threatened, and anybody trying to be a little professional and isolate themselves, they get quickly isolated from their colleagues. It's a very sad situation.
Physically isolated.
Yes, and a few times you publish a story and within an hour you already are getting threats around. And in one case we went to a county, I will name it, I went to Lodwar when a few journalists had been attacked. And I would travel with a team with your managing editor here and someone from the Nation and others. And we were literally trailed the whole night because we met with groups of journalists and all that, a few things that happened. And we were trailed the whole night. We would know that we were not alone because some guys were monitoring these guys from Nairobi. What have they come to do? So, and you can imagine we've come from here and we're fairly protected and all that. But guys are, so you can imagine then this poor reporter down in Lodo who relies on a story per month to be paid per piece. That can be really, really hard. So we have to appreciate that there is a problem. But I when I spoke to the Council of Governors and spoke to them about during their meeting in Kirinyaga recently, there is a crisis because then you do that story, especially local radios, and the county will never invest there. It's a matter that we hope to pursue because these guys, if you cover the truth or rather what they do not like, you are just literally blacklisted. It's public money they want to spend on, because you rely on advertising and a few community announcements. You were not allowed to get anywhere near the county coffers and all that. So really there is a lot of stick and carrot being used very, very, in a very bad manner and all that. So it's a challenge we need to discuss. And you cannot be a media house, big, we have about 5 or 6 big media houses in Nairobi. The maximum number of bureau officers they have, I think the best is about 8. So we have 47 counties and almost 7 bureau officers. So we have 40 counties, and you have deployed a poor guy in Garissa. He has to work from under a tree and rely on someone for bundles to file a story. And you expect this person to file I think we're in the 2019, and Kenya is supposed to be one of the leading countries around. We need to do a little more investment. But coming to the story of Kidero, number one, who gave the nation this story? We really appreciate.
You don't believe they did their own investigation?
I appreciate that there is investment in investigation. That is very important. And I appreciate also that the anti-corruption agencies, EACC, DPP and DCI is feeding the media certain stories to drive certain agenda. I am greatly disturbed that the media doesn't question why are we being given this. so that we are getting a pattern where prosecute guys in the court of public opinion, then get them to sign a statement the next day. It is good, principally in bond. It's very expensive for the media to invest in some very deep stories. But when then that becomes a pattern, every day we have these stories and all that, you realize this story is very deep. You cannot just get it unless you have an insider. You shouldn't over-celebrate that, because then you're being used to crucify people. So I would either say, number one, you have already judged Kidero, rise and fall of Kidero. It would have been, is it the fall of Kidero, you know? Because already you have concluded this guy has fallen. Yes, this guy has not been, convicted yet. And so that a few times I think the media judges too fast, while I rather that the media should really open conversations around topics and all that. And again, I insist that we appreciate providing leads to the media, but always ask, why is someone giving me this story to run? It's getting too much. We appreciate that, because some stories are very juicy and interesting, but sometimes it's too much.
It's getting too much. The sources are now too much. The leaks,
yes, I mean, the media is being used to crucify people.
You have to ask yourself, whenever there's a government agency that's trying to give you a leak, and it's consistently about one thing, what is the government's agenda with regard to that specific bit of information? Now, I'm not saying that with regard to this story. I've gone through it. It's more of a narrative of what's been happening with Kidero. But generally speaking, generally speaking about how the war against corruption is being prosecuted, if you look at some of the earlier stories from NYS to coming to the scandals that came after that, it essentially is what David is saying, right? The bit of information that's given out is not very deeply interrogated, and then now you have this storm that's built around the war against corruption, right? And you have to question the motives of your sources. I mean, that's journalism 101, right? Question the motives of your sources. Triangulate the evidence with other things that you can verify. Take your time.
Have you ever turned down leads?
Yeah, I mean, that's you have to be able to interrogate that, right? If someone's giving you a lead for a specific goal, first of all, anybody who's giving you a lead has an axe to grind. Anybody who's giving you a lead,
there's
right?
an agenda.
There's an agenda, so you have to discover what the exactly, yeah, and you have to discover for yourself what that agenda is, and find out whether you can live with that agenda, if indeed it is the truth.
Probably why the damn story is now dead, because it hit the headlines, it followed each other.
Now where is
the damn story?
I saw a story on KBC where the crew had been taken to Aurora and Kimwaror, and the guys who were supposedly bankrupt were there. The head of Kerio Valley was there. So I'm like, are these the same people who were demonized, who we were led to believe had, forked tongues and horns shooting out of their heads? So we have to really be careful about things like that. Okay. And I'm not saying that there isn't corruption, because there is, and there's a lot to uncover, as you will see from the Auditor General's office reports. But the thing is, we have to fact check these things for ourselves.
No, secondly,
and then again, it goes to the lazy journalism that we're talking about. Kidero had been governor for 5 years. Kenyans were complaining that Kidero is not performing, and a lot of people saw him as this technocrat who would really be the face of Nairobi, or the face of how counties should work. But we gave him the leeway. He did everything he did for 5 years. There was very few stories. I heard him on radio, and I know of 2 radio hosts who unfollowed me when I called them out when he went to one of the local radio stations in the morning, and it was at a time when Nairobi was doing so badly. But he came out looking so clean. They were talking about, where do you have lunch, what do you do? And I was like, what are you guys doing? You have a chance to have Kidero. And so now, when you bring us this, it is too little too late. We should have been able to follow Kidero, just like now. When Sonko leaves is when we will start saying he did this. When finally the ESCC gets hold of him in 2023 is when it should
become that happen?
Yeah.
Should that happen?
All right. Hold that thought. We have to take a quick break. We'll be back with more, Tom. And the question we're asking you this morning is, what more can journalists do to keep those in power accountable. The hashtag is Daybreak. You can SMS 22422. You can call in 0719 777 Mutuku says we need fearless individuals and more so media support in advocating for a new Kenya. The Githeri media is a total failure.
My goodness.
We get that statement a lot, the Githeri media, but we'll delve into that in
popularized in 2017.
Let's take a short break. We'll be back with more.